sticking records, got the lights down low. Souldisco, where the groovy people go. Hit play, let the music flow. Old school beats with a modern glow. Hello everybody and a very warm welcome back to the latest episode of Hidden Jewels of Soul and Disco. I do hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. In this week's episode we are featuring the iconic Peebles.
Did you ever have to stand there on the outside looking in? They're not all alone. Some turn to dust, some have fun.
Billy Peebles was born on April the 27th in 1947, and she was the seventh child of 11. And if you have already seen some of my videos when I'm discussing the musical roots from some of these artists, it's pretty much almost always the same. They have gospel roots. And with Anne, it was no exception to the rule. Anne's father was having a church and also, of course, a choir, the Peebles Choir. And from a very early age on, Anne performed in that choir. This choir proved to be very successful as an opening act for the likes of Mahalia Jackson and Sam Cooke. Let's hear a little bit about Anne's relationship to her father and what he thought about her starting a musical career in her own words.
My dad knew that I wanted to be a singer. He knew that he told me, he said, well, I knew that I always knew you would be the one to step out, because the other kids did it because it was a must. I did it because it was a love, and he knew that. And he wished me well, and he was happy for me.
In those days, without social media and a possibility to present yourself to a worldwide audience, you really had to pay your dues by starting singing and performing in local clubs in St. Louis. And that's what Anne did. In around 1965, she joined the Oliver Sane Show. Oliver Sane himself is a very important figure in the St. Louis music scene. He also helped to shape that music scene as a band leader, record producer, songwriter. So I highly suggest that you also check out Oliver Sane. In 1968, things really started to take off for Anne. She made a visit in Memphis to meet her brother and his fiancée. And during that time, she also went to local clubs. And one night, she was in a club where no other than Gene Bolex Miller was appearing as a band leader in the club. She approached him and told him, hey, may I can sing a tune up here? And he was like, oh, I have the house packed and I don't know if she's good. Maybe you come back tomorrow and let's see. But that was actually the beginning of her career and her contract with Hi Records. I found a news clipping from those days, and to make it a little easier for you, this news clip will be read to you. And there's also an interview segment I want to show you to you. So let's have a look.
Little Ann Peebles isn't a recording star yet, but she just might be soon. And if she is, it's all because her brother, Jerome Peters, who is a Marine, had a girlfriend in Memphis. Little Ann, that's her name, is a St. Louis girl. Last June, she tells the story, I came to Memphis with my brother, he's stationed at Oceanside, California, to see his girlfriend, Barbara Taylor. Well, we were going out one night, and we went to Rosewood, and I asked the orchestra leader to let me sing. The orchestra leader was Gene Bolegs Miller, who has been playing at Rosewood for quite a few years. Bolegs broke in. The first night she came up and wanted to sing. So many times people say they can sing, and I get bit. And I've got a full house. So I tell him now to come back the next night. That usually ends it. Well, she came back the next night and I heard something come out of that microphone, and I was amazed. So I brought her down here to High Studio. Little Ann is rightly named. She stands 5'3" and weighs 98 pounds. You won't believe that voice she's got, Miller said. She's got volume. Willie Mitchell and Miller are the producers for a high label, with Ann singing Walk Away and Can't Let You Go. She does rhythm and blues stuff, Miller added. She's the Aretha Franklin type.
Actually, Bowlegs took me to the studio. He was the one that really, I'll say, discovered me. Took me to the studio, and we met with Willie Mitchell. So Bowlegs actually started working with me first. And the reason why I just didn't record right then was I was underage. I went back home, had the contract signed by my dad, and he knew Oliver Sang, a great musician in St. Louis. And Oliver Sang wrote the first song for me that I recorded, which was Walk Away. Still Away was on the album. So Walk Away was really the first single.
With Willie Mitchell on hands as the house producer of High Records and Zane being a talented songwriter, she released her first single in 1969, which was called Walk Away, which was followed by Give Me Some Credit, and on the B-side there was Solid Foundation. And to top it off, in 1969 she also released her debut album. This is Peebles, and I absolutely adore this cover art. It screams late 60s. In 1970, she released the single Part-Time Love, which was the lead single for her second album in 1970, which was called Part-Time Love. If you're a collector of original pressings, you have to be very strong now, because finding the early recordings, the early albums from Peebles on High Records got very costly. Some of these records sum up to a couple of €100 or dollars. So therefore you have to consider once again the quality of the record, but they aren't cheap anymore. But there are reissues out there, and you'll find her music on streaming platforms as well. In 1972, she released her third album, which was called Straight from the Heart. And here once again is a news clipping from the release of the album, and we get some background information. Once again, this is being read to you to make it a little more convenient.
Ann Peebles sings Straight from the Heart in a High London album bearing that appropriate title. Although Ann is 24, she is a relatively new voice in contention for top honors as singer. Her father, leader of the choir in their church in East St. Louis, encouraged Ann to take up singing after she graduated from high school. Another influence that has helped shape her career was the tutelage of Willie Mitchell, an executive producer, vice president, and house band leader. Mitchell produced this first Ann Peebles album, which gives the singer strong instrumental and vocal support. Ann says that she has been influenced by two of her idols, Aretha Franklin and Otis Redding. Her voice ranges wide and even extends to blues shouting. The album contains her latest hit single, I Feel Like Breaking Up Somebody's Home Tonight. Another standout is the number released last July as a single, Slipped, Tripped, and Fell in Love. Other highlights, I Pity the Fool, 98 Pounds, How Strong Is a Woman, I've Been There Before.
In the early 70s, she had a string of hit singles for High Records. For example, we have Generation Gap Between Us, I Pity the Fool, Slipped, Tripped, and Fell in Love, Break Up Somebody's Home, Somebody's on Your Case, I'm Gonna Tear Your Playhouse Down, and also Do I Need You. In 1973, she was going on a certain event, and it started to rain. And the rain clashed against the window, and she was like, I can't stand the rain. And this was pretty much the beginning of her most iconic song. And also, soul-wise, this is an absolutely iconic and memorable song. Because she also co-wrote with her then boyfriend or fiancé, I Can Stand the Rain. But let's hear it from Anne herself, how that song got together.
Well, it was a rainy night, and I'll never forget. One of the DJs that was here in Memphis at that time was Bernard Miller, called him Mr. B. He was over, he was gonna take us to the concert and everything, and it began to thunder, lightning. So it was a heavy, heavy weather storm out, and we decided we'll stay in. And all of a sudden, I know I really wanted to go to this concert, and I just said, I can't stand the rain. And they were saying, well, that's a great title. But at that time, I didn't think it was a title because I wanted to go to the concert. And they immediately sit down, start writing on the piano. And we had a piano that we called the Big White Elephant because it was one of those big upright pianos. And some of the keys was kind of missing. But they started just playing a little melody and around I Can't Stand the Rain. And before I knew it, I was off into the song, writing the lines and everything. And this song was really amazing because it was the fastest song we ever wrote. We didn't have a problem anywhere. We just wrote it like in 15 minutes and sung it down. And we just knew, we just felt that we really had something. And nobody could tell us we didn't have a song because we just felt that. And the next day, I think we took it to the studio. And when Willie heard it, he knew it was a hit. And I believe we cut that song in the same week. And just like writing that song, cutting it was very easy. It was very, very fast, just cutting it. And when we finished cutting it, we didn't have the timbales on the front at the beginning. We just kept listening and listening because we had it all the way through there. And I don't know, I can't recall who really said it now, but they were saying, if you take the first couple of bars off, let's see what happened just with the timbales. We did that and it was just like magic. So that's how that song came about.
The success of that single led to yet another album in 1974, which was also called I Can't Stand the Rain. And here it is, with the iconic cover art. If you want to have an original copy of this one, as this was a very, very successful album, you'll find copies out there. Once again, you have to consider the price and the condition, but it's not so difficult to find I Can Stand the Rain, but more difficult to find her first albums on High Records. She continued to release albums during the 70s, and I want to point out all of them to you. Let's start. Telling It, released in 1975. If This Is Heaven in 1977. The Handwriting Is on the Wall in 1978, and I also want to point out that in Germany we had a different cover art. By 1979, the musical landscape changed dramatically. The mainstream wasn't into deep soul or so much soulful tunes. The mainstream market was disco and disco only. So Anne decided in 1979 to step back from the spotlight and having more time for her family. But in 1981, she released a duet with her husband Don, and the song was called Mon Bel Amour. And this also marked the last song which was released by her husband on High Records. It took till 1989 for Anne to release new music. And once again, the producer was Willie Mitchell, and it was released on his VNYL label. And I also found a very interesting news clipping interview from that era, which also sums up some aspects of her career. This is once again a pretty long one, so sit back and enjoy this very wonderful article.
The casual top 40 listener probably has never heard of singer Ann Peebles. She has never had a #1 hit and hasn't recorded an album in 10 years. But among soul fans and a core of music purists in England, Her shattering delivery, incomparable dramatic style, and interpretative skill are legend, and her 5 high albums command top dollar on the collector's circuit. Pretty impressive stuff when you think about it, and she probably does from time to time. But there was never any question in Ann Peebles' mind what was most important in her life. Her family and personal integrity were more valuable to her than gold albums and stardom. Indeed, it was concern for her son, Jevon, that led to her decision to depart the pop scene in 1978 and spend most of her time at home. "I didn't leave the business because I was bitter or because of sexism or anger," Ms. Peebles said during a recent interview. "I just felt Jevon needed me to be with him on a regular basis. He was 3 at the time, and I didn't want to be an absentee parent. So I just said it was time to take stock of what was important, think about what I was doing, and take some time off from recording." Now, a decade later, Ms. Peebles is back in the studio. She's reunited with Willie Mitchell, who produced all her landmark high LPs and wrote many of her biggest. A new album will be released this year, and there are murmurs that she sounds better than ever. "She hasn't lost a thing. She sounds more confident and stronger," says Mitchell, who's expecting big things from the new album. "We're already getting calls and telegrams every day from England. MCA's called, and they want to really push the album as soon as we get it ready. It's going to be one of our biggest records in 1989. If the record is a hit, it will be serendipity for Ms. Peebles. She's unimpressed with the trappings of pop glamour and seems genuinely flattered that so many artists, from George Michael to Paul Young and Gladys Knight, have praised her voice and songs. She has no regrets about being away so long, or the fact that she's an unknown to the general music audience. Singing is something I've wanted to do since I was 8 years old. I've always felt a performer's time will come and that it would be my turn someday. It's never bothered me that my songs didn't get much top 40 attention, or that other people could record them and do well. It's a compliment whenever anyone else records a song that you did, and if enough people hear your music, you get a satisfaction out of that." Ms. Peebles, 41, was born in St. Louis and remembers a talent show at Maryland Heights School as the event that sold her on a career in music. "I did the song The Lord Will Make a Way, and something just clicked while I was singing. I knew then that music was what I wanted to do with my life. It seemed so natural, and I really loved performing." Band leader and performer Bowlegs Miller introduced Ms. Peebles to Mitchell in 1969. She'd gone out with the band to the Rosewood Club where Miller's band was performing and wound up sitting in with the group. Miller was impressed enough to find out where she'd come from and whether she was working or signed with anyone. He eventually got Ms. Peebles and Mitchell together, and soul history was made as she became one of the most talked about female vocalists of the early 70s. Working with Willie was and still is wonderful. He knows so much about music and not just producing. He knows about singing, about mixing, about arranging. He was the person who put the timbals on the front end of I Can't Stand the Rain, and he's always had great ideas about what works in the studio. It was I Can't Stand the Rain that cemented Miss Peebles' status as a great singer. The mournful lyric setting, perfectly punctuated by her dramatic vocal, remains her greatest triumph. It was nominated for a Grammy, although it's just one among a host of other classics like Part-Time Love, Old Man with Young Ideas, If This Is Heaven, and Tear Your Playhouse Down. My husband and I got I Can't Stand the Rain from looking out the window one night. It was pouring outside, and I turned to him and said, "I can't stand the rain." Well, we looked at each other and then started writing. I know that sounds like a line, but that's how the song started. Ms. Peebles and vocalist or songwriter Donald Bryant have been married more than 14 years. They met when Bryant was a staff writer at Mitchell's Royal Studios, and he contributed a number of songs to her first LPS. The two have recently been working together on Bryant's own projects, a new gospel LPS slated for a label that reflects his shift in focus from R&B to spiritual material. Both of us being in the business hasn't really hurt or helped our relationship as much as the fact we've always been busy, dynamic people and never tried to put each other into any preconceived role. When I was starting out, Donald and Willie looked out for me and helped me, but they didn't try to make me do things just because they said do it. They'd sit down and show me what they wanted and told me why it would work. Now Donald and I are both involved in things, and we help each other instead of competing. While Bryant struggles to launch his record label by faith, Ms. Peebles spends the bulk of her time with her founder daycare venture. Bryant Academy at 3166 Kimball grew out of her initial involvement with daycare and her concern that preschool children get the best educational start. I'd always wanted to teach, along with singing, and getting into daycare was a good way to do that. I started working at other places, but I felt that it would work best if I got my own business going. The center was profiled last year on the syndicated 700 Club. They currently have a program, Read, Write, Speak, and Spell, that Ms. Peebles says provides critical training in basic skills. We start with basic phonics, then go to the cluster sound, and eventually expand into reading. We have the 5-year-old children reading well by the time they finish the program. Although she considers herself a full-time daycare worker and part-time singer, Ms. Peebles is also happy to be recording again. She wants to finish the new album, would like to make some concerts, and even anticipates a return trip to England, where she has appeared 3 times to overflow crowds and sparkling reviews. She laughs when told her personality's nothing like the foreboding, almost menacing image presented in some of her songs. Well, those songs do come out of my personal experience, but they're also done as part of a role. You don't have to necessarily be what your songs say, or be the same person you're singing about. I have a deep faith in God, and one of the things that I try not to do is take any song too far or sing about things that I feel are immoral. My songs just tell stories. Sometimes they're sad, but I think they're always good stories. With her son now taking piano lessons and attending the Word of Faith school, Ms. Peebles says she felt the time was right to resume in the world of popular music. Her host of fans and admirers couldn't be happier.
In the 90s, Anne continued to release material, and most notably a cooperation with Cyndi Lauper, where Anne was featured on the track Rollin' and Tumblin' on her 11th album, Memphis Blues. In 2012, Anne had a stroke and totally stepped back from the music scene and the spotlight. Anne Peebles is one of those artists who didn't make it big, who was not having the big breakthrough. But with her iconic voice and also the cult song I Can't Stand the Rain, she will always have a part, at least on compilation albums from the 70s. I Can't Stand the Rain was covered many, many times, and a very famous version is from Tina Turner. Tina Turner recorded I Can't Stand the Rain in 1984, and it was released in 1985 on her album Private Dancer. And what can I say? It became a million seller. If you're not so familiar with Anne's work, I highly, highly recommend that you check out her music. You'll find her music on Spotify, you'll find it on YouTube, you'll find it on all major streaming platforms, and of course on vinyl. I promise you, once again, you won't be disappointed. Anne is an absolutely stellar performer and absolutely highly regarded as a singer and songwriter. If you like that episode, I also highly suggest that you check out the playlist up here, and I catch you on the next one.